Well, good morning to you. This is Shane from Shane's Reviews, and I hope that you're having a great day today. We're going to be talking about a Stephen King book. I felt the disturbance in the force as it was, and I got really concerned, and then I realized there was a new book, and so I got it, I read it, and I've read it again. The first time was in paper, the second time was in audio. We'll talk about the audio one because, they're pretty much the same. Not a lot of variance, if any at all. But, of course, it was Stephen King. The name of the book is Billy Summers, and it was read by Paul Sparks. Now, quick note on the audio. Of course, it's on par with what you would expect if you got it from Audible. Give me a second, okay? So, as far as like emotional responses from literature, that's kind of like my scale. That's my go-to when it comes to, is this good? Is it bad? Did I have any kind of a reaction to it? Did it make me feel anything? Do I care? Am I invested? What's the story? Is the story interesting? Are the characters migrating from point A to point B? Are they growing? Are they not growing? All these kind of things are important to me as a reader. There are other things that are important too, that take a kind of a second seat to the actual story, but more along the lines of like descriptions and way that things are described or not described, or if it's showing not telling or telling not showing, if the antagonist is strong, if the protagonist is strong, if the characters are true to themselves. And these are things that I've harped on quite a bit, and I kind of felt like some of the stuff that Stephen King was putting out was just, well, if we're honest, just not good. And there's a reason for that. And I've mentioned that a few times that I need to get past my own personal bias of what I think of whenever I think of Stephen King. Now, before you tune off though, before you jump channels, before you jump to the next video, hold on a second. Because this time, I'm not trashing Stephen King, and as a matter of fact, I actually respect this book and I enjoyed it. There's been times where I've gotten books from authors that I absolutely adore whenever it comes to what they can do and pull off, etc. And it'll just be not necessarily lackluster, but not for me. But this book kind of spoke to me a little bit, and let me tell you why. I think that Stephen's been kind of reevaluating, reformulating the way that he does things and the way that he writes. Sure, there's growing pains whenever you're doing stuff. That's a true statement. So I have to put the Stephen King pre-accident, Stephen King post-accident, completely in different categories. Until now. There we go. So the interesting thing about this book is it's atypical Stephen King, but with Stephen King writing in it. I really enjoyed the structure. I enjoyed the way that he told the story instead of jumping from point to point to point to point. It was just one long, contiguous type of a thing. Did I say that correctly? So the long of it is, getting back to the book, I really enjoyed that it was just that long story from point A to point B that followed one person, which is very much an anti-hero because the guy is a hitman, and then there's some weird things that happen during his job, and then there's some traumatic things that happen to another individual that's brought into the story, and then the story becomes more about them and them moving past things that had happened before. Some of it had to do with the resolution. Some of it had touches like Jack Reacher, that sort of a thing, where this character was a no-nonsense, going to make changes, had a very unique morality amongst themselves, but nothing contradictory. There was very much truth to the characters that Stephen was writing. And for that, I applaud him. And the way that he ended this book, I'm not going to tell you a thing about it. But that was a way to end a book. The big thing in this was it felt like almost a revival of Stephen King's ability to tell a story to me. It wasn't so much... Actually, I think I know why I liked it so much, because he got rid of all the stuff that was stereotypical to him in the sci-fi genre of having outlandish whatevers, and focused on the story of these two people. What A person and B person, what they went through in the story, conclusions for them and conclusions for the story, instead of leaning so heavily on something very grandiose. All those standard tropes that usually would be associated with Stephen King's writings, for that most part, just wasn't there. And so this came off like a much more polished story. I feel like this might have been a story that he absolutely loved. And that's awesome, because it shows in the text. It shows in the literature. It shows in the story and the storytelling. So I'm going to say that there's 3 books this year that I've gotten a hold of, and only 3. That have just been really bring a smile to my face, because it was a satisfaction in the experience of reading that literature. This is one. All right, so is it worth your time, efforts, and energies? Bet your rear end and that bottom dollar and whatever else you want to throw in there as a moniker of normalcy, if you will. But it's one of those things that I did get that reaction. I did care about the characters. I did care about their plight, their story, what they were trying to get through, the emotional baggage that was caused during the story, what the fallout of that would be, how they were going to get from point A to point B. Now, some of it might have been a little bit on the weak side in some people's opinions, but I feel like for a change, Stephen King did a pretty good job. I would be so happy just to shill out all the stuff that I ever get just to read more stories like this from him. And the thing is I'm probably not alone in that opinion. So that's going to be the question, is if you've read this, what's your thoughts on it? Yes, I know that some of the subject matter in it is tender. Some of the subject matter in it is rough. That's not what I'm focused on. What I'm focused on is the actual storytell that he did in this versus the last major book releases that he's done. Tell me what you think. I want to know. Please, let's talk about that. But I'm also going to ask a secondary question. If anybody else has any recommendations for books, please feel free to drop those in the comment section, and we will certainly check them out. Even if I don't make a review on them, unless it's completely outside of my range and a genre I'm really not interested in, which is few and far between, I do check them out. So thank you for everybody that ever has, and to anybody that ever will. Much appreciated. You guys be good. Make sure you wash your hands. Put your mask on. Stop being silly. Stop listening to everybody around you. Actually look into something that's called science instead of emotional response. And if you don't want to put your mask on, ask yourself, what was the last time that you saw somebody with polio in the streets? If you can answer that like everybody else does, go get the mask. Go get a vaccine so that you're not being a problem for everybody else around you. Okay? Cool. Thanks. Bye. Love you.
Peace.